Contact lost. Freighter Vesper 9 is gone. Confirmed burn pattern matches Valthoran drone strike. The words dropped like iron through the command deck of the Iron Veil. Commodore Torin Vask didn't look away from the laser plasma tactical display. Blue arcs flared red. Another ship turned to ash, another crew erased. Time between lock and detonation, he asked. Under 3 seconds, sir, replied Lieutenant Torin, jaw clenched, sweat dripping behind his ears despite the deck's dry chill. Same as the last two. Vask exhaled slowly. At last exhaled slowly. They're not guessing anymore. They're hurting. Vask exhaled slowly. They're not guessing anymore. At hurting. Vask exhaled slowly. They're not guessing anymore. At hurting. Vask said. The map stuttered. 8 more vessels. Cargo, diplomatic, even a decommissioned tug, flickered, marked as vaporized debris. Red rings swept out from each point of contact, showing where drone scans now overlapped. The blockade was no longer a line. It was a net, drawn tight around Earth's outer systems, and it was choking them. Outside the armored viewing bay, Jupiter's upper cloud deck swirled below like a sleeping monster, indifferent. Far beyond it, Sol's commercial arteries, once glutted with haulers, refinery tugs, mining convoys, had gone silent. The stars were still there, but Earth's reach had been severed. Entire stations had gone dark in the last 48 hours, not from damage, but from starvation. Energy councils from Europa and Ganymede have declared emergency rationing. Agricultural relay from Ceres missed its drop 2 cycles ago. That was before the grid locked down Saturn, Commander Renvol asked from the console pit, his tone dry but not detached. Half the outer trade zones offline. By the next cycle, the blackout will hit Earth's production lines. Vask didn't answer. He stepped closer to the display, watching the elegant curves of the Valthoran grid flex in real time. The enemy's drones weren't aimless. Each moved with chilling logic, spreading coverage gaps, cycling frequencies. And more kept arriving, autonomic, silent, untouchable. His knuckles cracked as he flexed his hand. Not from tension, from calculation. A comms officer called out, "Mars command link is stable. Priority packet from Fleet Intelligence marked Command Eyes Only." Vask nodded once. The officer slid a decrypted file across his station's heads-up display. A second later, the room darkened as a projection formed, sharp, sterile, burned onto the space above the holopad. Tacity. Mars Shipyard Complex. Strike window. TM-72 hours. Predicted force, Valthoran Core Legion 3, Ardvec. Vask's jaw locked. Mars was Sol's spine. If the shipyards were hit, Earth wouldn't just lose its ships. It would lose the ability to build them. 72 hours, Ren repeated, almost to himself. Vask spoke quietly. They're not trying to win a war. They're trying to collapse an economy. No ships, no freight, no defense, no trade. We don't fight back, we suffocate. Council won't allow preemptive strikes. They'll argue we're provoking escalation. We're already being bled. He turned from the display. The faces on the command deck were steady, but he could read the tension in their stances, the twitch of fingers, the subtle shift of shoulders leaning too far forward. Trained men, brave men, but tired. And tired minds hesitated. "Bridge to Defense Council," he ordered. "Secure line, tell them Vask is invoking Protocol Winterglass." There was a beat of hesitation. "Sir?" "Winterglass? That's strategic fallback." "That's Luna." "Yes," he said. "I'm taking the 3rd Division off-grid. Mars is the target. We'll regroup at Luna's dry docks. Final fallback defense. Wren spoke without moving from his post. The council will view that as retreat. Then let them. His eyes narrowed and his voice hardened. Let them call it whatever helps them sleep while our freighters die in orbit. The bridge settled into a strained quiet as orders rippled outward. Subfleets began rerouting. Command channels encrypted. Ship movements masked beneath solar interference. A tactical withdrawal disguised as a refit rotation. The silence didn't last. A new tone shrieked across the deck. A triple frequency burst that bypassed comm filters. Broadcast incoming, shouted Torin. Public relay. Valthoran origin, direct from their capital flagship. Vask's hands tightened behind his back. Put it on deck-wide audio. The Valthoran signal cut through like bone against steel. Not a voice, not exactly. More like the approximation of one. A forced mimicry shaped from audio fragments to sound familiar, but never human. Sol Confederacy, your industrial aggression has destabilized economic symmetry. You were offered terms. You declined. The path forward narrows. Another beat. Then the tone dropped. Lower. Colder. You will disarm, immediately, or Mars will fall as example. The signal ended. No flare. No flare, just a vacuum where diplomacy used to be. The deck was dead silent. Then Wren muttered, that wasn't an ultimatum, that was a death notice. Vask turned toward the bridge doors. Prep my transport to Luna. I want full sensor logs of the last 20 drone passes along the series route. Send orders to Captain Drex to begin atmospheric evac of mining crews in Jupiter's shadow sector. And start rerouting all Europa shuttles. I don't want a single ship near their scan net when we go dark. He paused at the threshold, then turned back. Make no mistake, this isn't a retreat. It's a reshaping. Let the Empire think they've won the opening move. Let them tighten their grid. Let them prepare. He stepped through the door. We'll teach them what slips through ice. By the time Torin Vask stepped off the transport ramp onto Luna's dry dock platform, the cold had already sunk past the gloves and settled into his knuckles. This wasn't weather. It was the kind of engineered cold that clung to everything, left frost lacing the bolts, made your lungs draw tighter. He welcomed it. Warmth made men sluggish. This place, sharp with cold steel and urgency, was exactly what the fleet needed. He strode into the command alcove without waiting for clearance. Engineers turned at his arrival, a few saluting with half-frozen fingers before returning to their work. On the central diagnostics board, compiled data from Valthoran drone scans flickered across radiation-mapped hull signatures. Show me the Mars corridor logs. Series approach vector all 32 passes, he ordered. Technician Halv jerked his head in acknowledgement and loaded the file. Vask leaned in. The readouts painted clear patterns. Thermal trails, decoy heat bursts, broken wakes. But something was wrong. The Valthoran drones flagged some objects and ignored others moving at identical speeds. Hold frame 19, Vask said. The screen halted on an outbound civilian hauler caught mid-jump. No stealth system, no shielding, marked as neutral. Compare this with frame 23. Military shuttle, same corridor. The screen flicked, this time a clean strike path. Intercepted, eliminated. Vask squinted. Same velocity, similar size, different outcome. Behind him a voice broke in. Civilian hull was frozen over. It came out of Titan's suborbital hangars. The temperature gradient was -180. That shuttle was running warm, didn't dump excess heat. Vask turned. The man standing near the back was older, sleeves rolled up, thick thermal cuffs stained with coolant residue. The ID tag read H. Torv, Cryo Engineering Division. You're Dr. Torv? Torv nodded. I've been watching the drone returns since the grid began cycling tighter. Quantum phase sensors, they hate uncertainty. Doesn't matter how advanced the system is, if the return's smeared enough, it defaults to non-hostile. Vask folded his arms. You're saying they see better when targets are warm? I'm saying they see worse when we're cold. I've run simulations. The drones scan in a layered pulse thermal profile, radiation bleed, acoustic vibration. Kill any two, and the third can't resolve shape fast enough. Then we suffocate our ships. Torv's eyes lit up. Or we bury them in ice. A beat passed. The officers nearby stopped pretending not to listen. Torv stepped forward. We layer the outer hull with crystalline frost, not patchwork shielding, full encasement. We drop core heat outputs, siphon exhaust into compression tanks, and route minimal life support through isolated micropumps. If done right, the drones won't see anything but drifting debris. How do we move like that? Vosk asked. Ion drives run hot. We preset vectors. Use planetary gravity assists. Minimal thrust. Just glide. Torv held up a thermal diagram. You don't hide in stealth. You disappear in stillness. Bask stared at the overlay. It wasn't elegant, it was borderline madness. But the data tracked. How long to make this happen? Torv hesitated. To outfit 42 ships? 48 hours. If every dry dock runs non-stop, you have 36. The engineer blinked. That's not... You have 36. Vask repeated. Prep your teams. Pull Europa ice. I'll get the haulers. He turned to his XO. Lockout comms. No transmission leaves Luna unless cleared by me directly. Aye, sir. By the next hour, shuttles had launched toward Europa's surface. Specialized core drills, retired since the station's terraforming program was mothballed, were reactivated, their operators scrambling to adapt them for military use. The ice wasn't decorative. It had to be dense, unfractured, chemically pure. Anything less would sublimate too fast under friction. Bask inspected one of the refit vessels, Vulture 6, as engineers worked beneath its dark hull. Cryopumps were welded to the sides like bloated veins. The cargo bays had been sealed shut, transformed into cold chambers to store backup frost sheets in case the outer shell broke during maneuvering. Pipes hissed as liquid nitrogen pumped through test lines. A junior officer handed him an intake report. 27 ships already in modification. We're cycling the rest in batches of 8. And the drones. They've shifted again. Their sweep path just looped past Callisto. We estimate they'll start scanning the moons directly within 18 hours. Then they're not just watching lanes anymore. They're looking for shadows. He stepped onto the bridge of the Iron Veil. Its usual noise reduced to the subtle hiss of internal vents and the occasional click of recalibration. Every ambient panel had been dimmed. Each system now ran at minimal draw. The air inside the command chamber was colder than usual. Intentional. Habit builds discipline. He called his senior staff. Gentlemen, we don't outgun them. We don't outrun them. So we outthink them. He waited, letting the weight of it settle. We are building ships that bleed nothing, that move with silence, that hide by becoming emptier than the space they pass through. The Valthorans built a net. We're going to float through it like ash. A murmur rippled through the officers. Confusion mixed with something more primal. The idea was alien, terrifying. And it was their only shot. Bask didn't offer comfort. He only offered clarity. His fleet will depart within 30 hours. Until then, you are to train under blackout protocol. No external transmissions. Internal movement limited to assigned sectors. Life support capped. You will feel the cold. You will learn to work in it. If the ice cracks, you die. His eyes scanned the room. No one flinched. He turned to Holt. Modify the neural ops simulator. I want every bridge team running 2-hour silent nav drills. No full comms. Use emergency-only light codes. Aye, sir. Bask looked toward the forward viewport. Outside, 3 Europa haulers approached, each trailing frost-streaked cargo holds. Behind them, the dark stretch of space shimmered with false peace. He didn't blink. Again, the corridor lights on Iron Veil dimmed in staggered segments, not from damage, but by design. Entire decks fell under blackout cycles timed to the fleet's new heartbeat. 11 seconds of stillness, then a whisper of recalibration, then stillness again. Every crewman from command to hull maintenance operated by that rhythm now. Not a sound, not a flare, not a drift of heat beyond necessity. It was no longer training, it was conditioning. Torrin Vask stood in the simulator chamber where the updated nav drills pulsed on overhead frames. Bright pings marked failures. Silent flashes meant success. 8 captains rotated through synchronized tests, guiding ghost ships across a projected model of the Valthoran sensor grid. Only one team had completed the sequence clean. "Repeat the last run," Vask said without raising his voice. Captain Errol, stiff-jawed and soaked in sweat, reset his sequence. His palms shook slightly as he adjusted the inertia vectoring. One miscalculation during glide phase and his ship crossed an active drone pulse. The simulator rang out a fail code. Vask walked over. "You're still thinking in thrust. You want propulsion. Stop it. You're not flying anymore." "You're falling with control." Errol nodded once. "Understood, sir." Outside the chamber, Iron Veil's decks had changed. The warmth usually vented into bulkheads was gone. Instead, skin met chill steel, breath fogged indoors. Fabric stiffened against the cold. Each ship had converted to ultra-low signature mode, rerouting power through cryo-shielded conduits, dampening systems, and redirecting thermal runoff into vacuum tanks. Even the food processors had been replaced with compact protein blocks. No heat, no emissions, no comfort. Down in Maintenance Deck 4, Petty Officer Drenvalet adjusted the insulation clamps on one of the cryo pumps beneath Vulture 6. His gloves had iced over, and the frostbitten skin under his right wrist split open with a tug. He didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned harder into the valve and locked it into place. "Cycle test complete. Heat dispersion stable," a tech reported. "Hull skin down to -192. Drones won't see us until we're already inside their scan net. Assuming the ice doesn't fracture during shift vector," Vele muttered. "If it does, we'll light up like a torch." Above deck, Vask reviewed the new timing data from Luna Control. The drone's scanning pattern had evolved. Instead of sweeping broad arcs, they now pulsed in vertical slits. Faster, narrower, sharper. "How tight is the window between passes?" 11 seconds, replied Holt, showing the timing tracker overlay. "They're adjusting phase rotation. More frequent, less thorough. They're compensating for the gaps we already learned to use." Vask tapped the side of the nav chart. "They're catching on. Which means we move before they adapt again. That gives us less than 12 hours to complete final training and full fleet synchronization," Holt warned. "Then they'll get 12, Vask replied. "Get every captain to command Hull C. I want neural ops final, synced, and running before 0 hour." The captains assembled inside the simulation chamber. All wore deep black thermals. Most hadn't slept. Vask didn't need rested officers. He needed adapted ones. The longer they operated in blackout, the sharper their reflexes in cold. "The grid scans every 11 seconds, he began. "That's your breath. That's your life cycle. You move inside that rhythm or you vanish for real. We're not flying out. We're not firing our way through. You'll be sitting targets inside cryo cradles while your ships drift like carved ice through fire." One of the younger officers, Lieutenant Coral from the Electon, shifted his weight. Vask caught it. "Something to say?" "With respect, sir, we're not used to going in dead. These ships were built for offense. We're taking in trained gunners, veteran helmsmen, engineers used to mobility, and we're locking them down and asking them to hold still. Some of them are going to crack." Vask stepped closer. "Let them. Better now than inside the breach. The ones who hold are the ones I'll trust to finish this." The silence following that was thicker than the air in the cryo bays. Back on Iron Veil, command operations reduced to hand signals and light pulses. Every console interface was trimmed to silent mode. No alerts, no audio prompts. Crewmen read status indicators through shifting thermal gradients or minute pulse vibrations embedded into gloves. Outside, drone paths curved closer to Europa's orbit. One scout ship, the Vexillar, drifted 100 kilometers too close to a scan arc. Its navigation officer, under pressure to adjust trajectory, activated a stabilizer burst, without recalculating core output. A flare pinged off its hull. In orbit, the nearest drone shifted direction. "Signal spike, repeat, signal spike," someone on the emergency link shouted. The deck crew watching on Iron Veil froze. On screen, the drone pivoted, scanned, halted, then moved away. The ship's flare had died too fast. The ice held. The heat didn't last long enough to register. "Tell Vexler to disable all non-emergency thrusters. They're riding with glide controls only now," Bask said. His tone never changed. "If they flicker again, we eject their heat tanks manually." Holt approached him after. "They'll talk, sir. If not now, then later. Officers are nervous. Some think this is a suicide run." "It is," Vask said without blinking. "If they don't want to be part of it, they can be off the ship by the end of this cycle. But anyone who stays will follow this plan as if their brother's coffin is already welded into the hull beside them." Holt didn't question it further. Final countdowns began across Luna's field. Subfleets initiated orientation locks. Zero-burn clamps attached. Communications sealed. Across each command bridge, one number now dominated all strategy: 11. 11 seconds between pulses. 11 seconds to slide through open air before detection cycled again. 11 seconds to hold breath. 11 seconds to test will. On Iron Veil, Vask stood alone now in the memorial wing, a quiet alcove built long before the blockade. He passed a row of glass-etched panels, each bearing names of fallen ships. Beneath his fingers, cold ridges formed the title plates: Voltron, Aegir II, Marlin Spire, Helix Dusk. He didn't speak. He didn't pray. He memorized each one in silence. Because by tomorrow more would join them, and he'd know every name. Hour 70. The fleet moved like shards of silent debris, adrift across the dark between moons. No burn signatures. No radio pings. No light beyond the starlight fractured on their frost-covered hulls. Inside the Iron Veil, the temperature hovered just above freezing. Breath misted against visors. Crew hands operated in gloves too thick for finesse, relying on muscle memory honed during blackout drills. Every boot fall, every shift of weight, felt heavier beneath the command of inertia and restraint. "Status on scan pulses?" Vask's voice, barely above a whisper, reached Holt over internal line-only comms. Holt checked the synchronization chart. Next wave sweeps in 13 seconds, were lined between drone arcs still holding null. Vask didn't nod. He simply looked forward through the reinforced viewing wall, the interior glass now rimed with frost. Their heading, the breach corridor. The whole Earth intelligence had mapped weeks ago, in quiet desperation. 22 ships behind them held formation like floating icebergs, layered down to the last hull seam in cryogenic sheathing. Inside each, men sat motionless in strapped cradles, their body heat recycled through siphoned returns, minds locked to nav instructions synced to external guidance, beacons flickering from remote drones. The grid was awake, its patrol paths looped tighter, its scouts adjusted paths not based on position but on drift anomalies and stray echoes. The Valthoran drones, shaped like spined serpents with bulbous sensor clusters, weaved across orbital channels in almost predatory circuits. Still, the fleet slid forward. Inside Harbinger 10, one of the scout corvettes assigned forward drift alignment, Captain Brawl Ors licked the inside of his mask to refocus his vision. Sweat built at the curve of his spine, even as ice grazed the exterior of his suit. "This feels like holding your head underwater waiting for someone else to tell you when to breathe." The tech across from him didn't respond. His fingers hovered over the glide adjustment toggles, eyes fixed to the inertial counter like it would scream if something went wrong. Back aboard Iron Veil, Holt studied the pattern feeds. Drones are shifting east. They've begun adapting to solar shadow occlusions. They'll sweep again in less than 2 cycles. Vask didn't move. "Then we split now." He reached across the control interface and activated the separation protocol. A silent command rippled through the fleet. 20 vessels, pre-designed for the faint, began angling toward Saturn's orbital basin. No thrust, just altered alignment, minute attitude shifts made to appear like wayward objects caught in pull drift. When the cleave leading the feint, Commander Halvorn watched his heads-up feed display the swarm's delayed reaction. Let's see if they like their bait wriggling. The Valthoran grid responded within 30 seconds. 80 drones adjusted vector. 5 capital ships shifted position near Jupiter's L4. They're pulling to intercept, Holt confirmed. They think we're circling back to defend Mars from their rear approach. They're playing the hand we wanted them to see, Vask said. With the feint underway, the remaining 22 ships narrowed course across the open channel toward Ceres. The zone ahead, barely navigable, was known only from sensor ghosts. Even Earth's intelligence couldn't verify how long the drones would stay distracted. This window stays open because they believe it's shut, Vask muttered. On board Severance 8, one of the long-range destroyers, the flight deck was so cold the control panels cracked slightly when touched too hard. Crewmen whispered checklist confirmations through earpieces, each voice strained from shallow breathing. The ice didn't just cling to the hulls now, it crept beneath their skin. One error, one slip of energy output, one waste vent miscalculated, and they'd light up the entire breach corridor like a flare. Bass glanced at the navigation overlay. Mark Ceres velocity intercept. Adjust for full drift and magnetic pull. Align retrograde angle for final descent at minimum brake vector. Acknowledged, Holt replied. The final leg required absolute silence. Even internal systems were cut to minimum. Backup life support ran manually. Lights dimmed until only red filaments remained to mark thresholds and station seats. Hull temperatures fell further. The fleet passed into the last drone-free segment. Ceres began to grow in the forward viewport, a dark marble, peppered with shielded Valthoran installations, defensive towers buried beneath rock and, just beyond its southern ridge, the anchorage platform where the Sovereign Claw rested. The flagship of the blockade, the center of the Empire's field command. The brain feeding orders to the grid. Reading 5 warcruisers near the station, 4 destroyers in rotating guard orbit, Holt said. Still no pings. We're inside blind range. Vask said, each word measured. They're too focused on the decoy. He leaned forward, eyes on the structure now in range. The claw was massive. Bladed fins, sensor domes, weapon rails large enough to gut cities. It pulsed slowly with command signals, unaware of what drifted just outside its recognition net. Lock target mapping, Vask ordered. 0K on silent impact alignment, no ignition before terminal. He turned to Holt. You have 9 minutes. After that, their grid loops again. Holt nodded. Targets will be marked. No EM trace. Kinetic only. Good. Vask returned to his seat and looked out at the black field ahead, its silence pierced only by the faintest glimmer of cold hulls, slipping past stars that watched but never warned. Iron Veil moved into position, and the Sovereign Claw remained unaware it was already in the crosshairs. The countdown hit 0. At once, Iron Veil's payload hatches slid open, not with a dramatic burst but a measured, soundless release. Compressed rails inside the forward banks hissed as the first kinetic slugs launched. 10 rods, each the length of a fighter wing, coated in blackened graphite to avoid reflection. Their trajectory had been mapped for days. No onboard course correction, no propulsion, just momentum, silence, and calculated hatred. The Sovereign Claw didn't flinch. The rods struck seconds later. 3 hit the dorsal shield anchor, 2 punctured its lower spine, and 1 glanced across the relay array just above the bridge, disabling comms before the enemy even registered movement. Within Iron Veil, Holt spoke without raising his voice. Impact confirmed. Second volley away. The bridge lights didn't flare. The cold didn't ease. The crew only blinked. Nobody cheered. This wasn't over. It had only begun to unravel. Across the orbit of Ceres, the Claw's escorts spun into alert. 8 cruisers rotated their towers, locking onto incoming threat vectors, but the Sol fleet didn't behave like any formation they had trained against. Ice-layered ships flickered against their sensors like fractured hull ghosts. Targeting AI looped. Fire repulse systems delayed for verification. The time loss was enough. From Harbinger 10, Commander Braille Ors called out. Target array scrambling. They can't lock on. Push through and fan wide. Split them down the keel. Around him, 3 soul ships burst through the confused Valthoran outer wall, sliding under weapons arcs before their enemies' response protocols engaged. Hulls streaked with ice vapor. They threaded paths through active fire like falling wreckage. Not warships. Inside the Claw's central ops deck, the Valthoran bridge commander slammed a fist into the railing. Where's our forward screen? Why didn't we see the strike approach? A panicked sensor tech replied. Thermal masks block pulse readings. There's no fusion trace. We can't distinguish structure from drift debris. They're cloaked? No, they're dead on heat. Ice layer signatures. No emission profiles. Vale froze. His voice dropped. Then we're not fighting a fleet. We're fighting ghosts. A third impact rippled through the Claw, shaking the lower decks. Panels sparked. Support beams groaned. Fires burst from a side corridor and were quickly snuffed by vent locks. Back aboard Iron Vale, Holt's targeting board lit with hull breach confirmations. We cracked their outer shell, he said. Internal containment failing across Auxiliary Deck 4. Bask's hands remained steady. Focus fire on reactor housing. Don't aim for destruction, aim for paralyzation. Holt frowned slightly. Not finishing it. Not yet. We need them to panic before we kill them. Bask turned toward the comms unit. Patch through to open band. I want them listening. A low beep. Channel linked. This is Commodore Vask of the Sol Confederacy. We are one of 120 ships en route to remove your grip from the belt. You are not reinforced, you are not prepared, and you are not safe. He paused. You believed your net would hold, it just split wide open. He cut the line. Back inside the Claw, Vale paced toward the comms officer. Trace that transmission. Confirm how many ships they've deployed. We can't lock origin, they're spoofing sources. Readings show 3, maybe 20, but there are anomalies at multiple approach vectors. Then they've flanked us. Vale stepped toward the tactical display. His eyes didn't blink. Pull half the defensive fleet to intercept likely Sol trajectories. The rest spread to intercept fallback. But sir, one of his captains spoke over link. Our engines are already strained. We're not losing this flagship, Vale snapped. In that moment of distraction, Holt recalibrated strike pattern. Kinetic bank 2, read target to bridge rear deck. Aim to puncture atmosphere seals and force a pressure collapse. Skip shield bank. Let it hit flesh. From Iron Vale, 4 rods released. The timing was so narrow, the Valthoran AI skipped a response window. They landed like punches through armor. The Claw's bridge rear cracked. Atmosphere rushed out of the open gash. 2 officers were sucked through the breach, their suits split by debris. Alert klaxons triggered. One of the only things still functioning on the command deck. Panic set in. And then came the unexpected. From the Valthoran cruiser Urshak, signal pings ceased. Its engines shifted position, vectoring away from the fleet formation. It didn't fire. It didn't move to defend. And disengaged. Vale's second-in-command stared at the tracker. They're defecting. Vale hissed. What? They've shut down weapons, shield systems offline. They're broadcasting passive beacon codes. Bask saw it too, Holt confirmed with a nod. They just cut ties. That ship just pulled out of engagement. Why? Bask didn't answer at first. Then, because they realize they were never part of the Empire, just the insurance plan. He stood. Tell the fleet, do not engage Urshak, let them leave. Within minutes, the panic spread. Another escort ship pulled vector. Then another. Every time the Claw spun to regroup, it found fewer allies. Bask turned to Holt. Their command net is breaking. Now. We kill it. The Claw's shattered spine bled fire into orbit. Its port flank sagged inward, fractures glowing along the deck where reactor shielding had collapsed. But it hadn't died. Not yet. Inside Iron Vale, Holt's eyes stayed locked on the telemetry stream. Target decks are in freefall, but bridge integrity is holding. They've rerouted systems, possibly secondary command online. Vask didn't look away from the forward viewport. Then they're still issuing orders. We cut that voice next. A new vibration ran through the hull, not from weapons fire, but from within. Coolant alarms chirped. Frost monitors blinked amber. "We're losing cryo thresholds across half the fleet," said Engineering Chief Rel over internal comms. "Exterior ice is destabilizing. Radiation from crossfire starting to breach thermal buffers." Vask turned to Holt. "Estimate time until full sublimation." 6 minutes. Maybe less. After that, we're fully visible to their drones. Vask didn't hesitate. "Then we give them fog." He keyed the fleet-wide override. "All vessels vent cryotanks on my mark. Disperse vapor fields and rotate to scatter patterns. You're not hiding anymore, you're confusing." One by one, Sol ships obeyed. Manual levers were pulled, pressure locks disengaged. Cryogenic fluid hissed from hull ports and auxiliary bays, expanding into swirling plumes that coiled around their formation like living smoke. What was once armor now became a weapon of distortion. Valthoran drones, unable to adapt, staggered in their tracking logic. Several redirected toward decoys, mistaking vapor blooms for hostile mass signatures. One patrol arc turned and struck a retreating cruiser in its flank. The ship burst, sending debris into the orbiting station. Inside Severant 8, Lieutenant Kern wiped condensation from his visor with the back of a shaking glove. Two of their own just clipped each other mid-formation. "They can't see anymore," Holt confirmed from Iron Veil. "Their systems hunting shadows." Vask stepped closer to the targeting console. "Open a gap in Sector 7. I want Harbinger 10 and Morn's Reach to punch through their center line. Draw fire. Create the illusion we're regrouping." "They'll take the brunt," Holt warned. But he volunteered for this. The two ships banked, pushing through the densest part of the vapor field, hulls bleeding, the last of their frost. Valthoran guns adjusted too late. Incoming rounds struck Morny's Reach broadside, splitting it clean. A rolling chain of detonations scattered through its framework before it broke in two. On the deck of Iron Veil, the comms unit blinked silently. Names scrolled across the tactical readout. 8 ships gone. No sound. No confirmation. Only a list. Right away. Wellspring. Sundeck 10. Hammerlight. Thorn Vale. Morn's Reach. Gallinax 2. Red Barricade. Holt's voice carried weight now. "Transmission block or not, Earth will know. These won't be forgotten." "The biolab triage number 3, Vask replied. He didn't allow grief to settle. Time was narrowing. The vapor was fading. The claw still breathed. "Holt, I want that bridge removed." The tactical officer adjusted firing solutions, recalibrating for trajectory friction caused by residual ice vapor. Adjusting for slowed drag. Target lock acquired. Railgun sequence engaged. 3 impacts followed. The first skipped across the claw's upper decks. The second cored through the bridge viewport. The third punched through the command canopy and detonated against the inner wall. The resulting rupture folded the control tower in half. Inside Valthoran Command, Admiral Cor Vale, jaw shattered, spine half-pinned under a collapsed railing, reached toward a console that no longer answered him. Flames kissed the ceiling. Emergency beacons flickered and died. Vask watched from orbit. "Signal strength. Gone," Holt replied. "Claw's central relay just blacked. There's no primary left. All remaining drones, unguided, half are drifting. Some are still in combat loops, but without new orders they'll default to burn suppress mode. And the fleet. They're hesitating. We're watching standoff holds all across their perimeter. Without Veil, there's no reinforcement trigger." Vask stood still for a long moment. Then, quietly, "We don't finish what's already falling. Let them disintegrate on their own." He turned from the viewport as a final puff of ice vapor trailed across the remains of Morn's Reach, now drifting as ash. Send the list to Luna Command, don't wrap it in ceremony, just the names. Aboard Iron Veil, the message was simple. It needed no drama. Vask typed it himself. No AI phrasing. No council review. Ceres is ours, Mars is next, unless you move. He pressed send. Across the shattered field, silence deepened. The claw no longer issued commands. Its reactor was cold, its bridge dark. What remained of the Valthoran fleet drifted in angled formations, unsure whether to regroup or scatter. They had no admiral, no anchor, only incoming wreckage and silence from command. Within minutes, Earth's interception arrays picked up the first scrambled relay. Confirm primary loss, Claude not responding, need new vectors, who is issuing fallback? Another followed, full of static and clipped voices. Units 2 and 5 reporting collision, unable to receive pulse. Who's running coordination? Then came the internal arguments, not between Sol and Valthora, but within the Valthoran fleet itself. Protocol 7 overrides. Claw was never authorized to break nav lines. Withdrawal breach, filed. We were youth. Sol's analysts didn't need to decrypt the full transcripts. The tone was enough. Disunity, doubt, blame. An Iron Veil, Holt stepped beside Vask, holding the latest traffic log. They're fighting themselves more than us now. Half the forward screens pulling to the edge of the grid, no real structure left. Vask glanced at the map. They had one voice. We silenced it. In orbit over Ceres, the battlefield cooled. The remaining Valthoran destroyers angled away, not in cohesion, but in irregular arcs, each making its own decision, each abandoning the concept of victory. Aboard Severance 8, Captain Renlow's final report came through. Enemy fleet fragmenting. Closest warship just broadcast retreat code, not surrender, just withdrawal. Vask issued the next directive. Do not pursue. Do not taunt. Let them remember what they ran from. The return journey began slowly. Cryosystems, already strained, started to buckle. Repairs were attempted mid-flight, with nothing but patch kits and raw tubing. Coolant ruptures triggered cascading failures. Sunstone Drift, a long-range gunship, lost containment on its midsection. The pressure locked crew and auxiliary hulls as the ship twisted apart. Two others, Axion and Greyflare, began leaking atmosphere hours later. Structural warping, unseen during combat, finally gave out. Aboard Iron Veil, internal alarms triggered quietly. Holt reviewed the readouts. Foregone. Survivors evacuated where possible. Some didn't make it out. Bosk said nothing. He simply turned and walked to the lower corridor. In Cargo Bay 3, they'd converted the outer chamber into a quiet space. Not for strategy, not for meetings. A wall panel had been removed, replaced with etched names. No frames, no banners, just cold steel, burned with every lost crewman from the battle. One of the engineers, Lieutenant Dre, stood nearby with a tool in hand, etching in the newest rows. Almost caught up, sir, he said without turning. Still got 10 left to carve. Vask folded his arms, watching the tool grind into the steel. The sound was dry, raw, final. Dre added another name, Lieutenant Coric Vale. He paused after it. I heard he stayed behind to seal the bulkhead so his team could evac. Did, Vask replied. Dre moved to the next. Later that cycle, they held the funeral, not with speeches, not with ceremony. Just a single line of officers, each taking their turn in the cold bay, reading one name. No rank, no title, one breath, one name, one step aside. Holt spoke softly when his time came. Charon Hollow, Navigator, Harbinger 10. He stepped back into line. Vask waited until last. He placed his hand against the final etching. Morn Dask, he said. Chief Engineer, Morn's Reach. He didn't look at the others. He walked out before the cycle finished. By the time Iron Veil approached lunar orbit, the wreckage had already started falling. Chunks of Valthoran drones, scorched fragments of sensor arms, shattered scanning lenses, broken relay cores. drifted into Earth's gravity well, pulled downward like shattered teeth. Some pieces scattered in upper atmosphere, others glowed faintly before burning out. A few reached lunar surface, cratering near old observatories. On Luna's council docks, the defense ministers watched the feed in silence. They didn't cheer. The footage didn't need music or narration. Above them, across Earth's sky, streaks lit the darkness. Symbols, not warnings, not threats. Proof. The surrender didn't come with banners or formal processions. No ceremonial envoy stepped forward. It came through a fractured signal, stammered through static, and patched together by Earth's analysts. A cluster of Valthoran counselors, speaking over one another, offering 3 systems in exchange for a ceasefire. Their message lacked defiance. It wasn't diplomacy. It was capitulation dressed in protocol. Bask stood at Luna Command when the relay finished playing. The council room was quiet. Several defense advisors looked to one another, unsure whether to respond with relief or caution. "They still have ships," said Director Helvern. "Scattered but armed. Their silence may not last." "They gave up the center of their grid," Vask replied, "and the seat of their command. They won't organize again for decades, if at all." Helvern turned toward him. "The systems they're offering, Sathari Reach, Varn Gate, and Chassel Drift, are resource sectors. Minimal population, high industrial weight. They want to cut losses before someone else in their empire demands their seat. They're not protecting themselves anymore," Vask said. "They're protecting position." Within 48 hours, the agreement was accepted. No galas, no public signatures. Sol posted monitors at the designated borders. Valtharan vessels withdrew entirely from Earth-aligned lanes. Trade vessels, once buried in dry dock or waiting in shadow, began moving again. Routes reopened, ports buzzed with repair contracts and revived supply chains. Mars shipyards resumed construction. The first convoy to cross from Varngate back to Earth's outer colonies carried raw alloy and water tanks, supplies once lost to the blockade. On its flank, a small escort bore the Sol emblem, flanked by hull patches of frozen crystal. The last ship still coated in remnants of the ice layer strategy. In orbit, Iron Veil docked with Luna's upper spires for the first time in 4 months. Vask stepped off to muted applause. Not public, not televised. Officers and engineers lined the corridor in silence. He walked past them without speech. Not out of disregard, but because none of them wanted words. They'd all been inside that grid. They all knew who didn't walk back out. Admiral's rank came through an hour later, delivered in person by Strategic High Counselor Varnick. "You rewrote our doctrine without asking permission," the older man said with a flat expression. Vask didn't reply. "You violated every engagement principle this office stood by. You gambled the fleet on a theory. I buried their flagship without a single broadcast ping." Varnick's jaw tightened. "You'll oversee reformation of Earth's tactical framework, starting immediately." Vask looked out the chamber window toward the moonscape. "You're assigning me a desk." "I'm assigning you authority," Varnick corrected. "Because every officer under you is already doing what you taught. We may as well catch up to our own doctrine." Ice layer protocols were archived that same week, marked under the label Strategic Last Measure Deployment. Engineers noted that the method was unsustainable for long-term campaigns, too fragile for repeated use. No plans were drafted to reproduce the technique. Still, no one deleted the files. Instead, they were stored beneath Sol's Defense Doctrine repository under a quiet category labeled Contingencies That Should Not Have Worked. Earth's political landscape shifted. The Confederacy's 12 systems, once seen as a fragile cluster of colonies orbiting an aging homeworld, now stood at the center of post-conflict trade. Independent outer world governments sent envoys. Former neutral states asked for technology sharing accords. Systems that once overlooked Earth began using its name in negotiations, as weight, not charity. On Mars, where many of the fallen had once lived, a new structure rose beside the east wall of the shipyards. Obsidian stone, 10 meters high, No military banners, just names. Carved in raw block, unpolished. 3,200 dead. No ranks, no divisions. No grouping by ship, just one continuous line of memory that wrapped around the monument like orbit itself. Vask visited alone, no escort, no announcement. He walked the curve of the wall slowly, stopping only when he reached a section near the back. Yaren Hollow, Daskmorn, Fillet Kern. He placed his palm on the stone and stood still until the light shifted behind the clouds above. Later, he boarded Iron Vale once more. The crew was different. New faces, young hands, the old bridge already reconfigured under post-war doctrine. Some stations had been upgraded. Others still bore the marks of hasty repairs made during blackout deployment. He stood near the forward hull, where remnants of cryo-welded ice remained locked in reinforcement panels. Impossible to scrub, stubborn as memory. Holt approached. Repairs on outer vent plating will finish next cycle. They're asking if you want it replaced. No, Vask said. Dated. Fragile. Now. That's why it stays. Holt nodded once and returned to his post. Vask stepped closer to the hull, watching the faint reflection of his face in the frost-stained layer, distorted but intact. He didn't speak to anyone else, just the ice. They built a net to strangle us, he said quietly. We froze the strands and walked through. He looked away, and never repeated the words again.